Greetings, my friends. Please make certain that you are still subscribed to this channel because every day I'm hearing from other people that they have been unsubscribed without their knowledge by YouTube. And if you are not subscribed, please consider supporting this channel. We need you. Thank you. Everyone knows that Star Trek Discovery is the worst thing ever to happen to Star Trek. That's just a fact. Even the original cancellation in 1969 was nothing more than a blip on the radar for Star Trek because it immediately went into syndication. And say what you will about Spock's brain or The Way to Eden, terrible episodes like those helped Star Trek cross the line to a total of 79 episodes, just enough episodes to put together a syndication package, and after cancellation, Star Trek became more popular than ever. We then got the Star Trek movies, new Star Trek shows, and Star Trek was a thriving franchise throughout the 90s until finally Les Moonves canceled Star Trek Enterprise just when it was getting good. This should have been the end of Star Trek. It certainly would have been better for the franchise to end there, on a note at least in tune with the symphony of optimism that Gene Roddenberry composed. At least then, we would have our happy memories. We'd still be buying Star Trek merchandise in stores, still be going to conventions, still keeping the flame alive in our hearts, just as we did in the past during dry spells following cancellations. But then came Jar Jar Abrams' Star Trek and Star Trek Discovery. Giant streams of piss aimed squarely to extinguish those flames of enthusiasm in the fandom. I have often said that Star Trek Discovery is written by people who hate Star Trek for people who hate Star Trek. And that has never been more apparent than in Season 3, Episode 2 of Star Trek Discovery, when the so-called writers, no longer content to imply that they hate Star Trek, make it explicit and directly insult the creator of Star Trek, Gene Roddenberry. Not indirectly, as in the past, by destroying canon with stupid contradictions, corrupting the optimistic tone of Roddenberry's universe with ugliness, and damaging the brand with idiocy. No. While Star Trek Discovery continues to do all those things, in this episode they insult Gene Roddenberry by name. The moment in question comes when Giorgio and Tilly are walking around the ship and Tilly looks down at Giorgio's shoes, as she is wont to do at times because, hey, we're always looking at each other's shoes after our ship crashes and loses power and lots of extras are being rushed to sickbay. And she says, Giorgio, you've got some Leland on your shoes. So Giorgio says someone needs to clean up this mess. And we cut to a lowly crewman, a white male of course, with a shovel, scooping up pieces of the aforementioned Leland from the deck with a shovel. This shot right here is Star Trek Discovery at a glance. This sums up the show perfectly. It is ugly because we have dead body parts, blood and gore all over the floor left over from Season 2. It is stupid because you're telling me on this ship that has a magic bullshit spore drive that twirls the ship anywhere instantly, they don't have a better way to clean up a mess than with a shovel. We have better ways of doing that now. But it is nasty and humiliating work scooping up body parts with a shovel, which is the point, obviously. And now we come to the ultimate insult to Star Trek, the humiliation of its creator. The absurdly named Jet Reno, played by Tig Notara with all the elan and verve of a piece of cardboard served up with vanilla ice cream minus the vanilla, is talking, or rather snarking in a grating monotone to Stamens the mushroom reindeer with his very, very shiny spores, and says, "How many drugs are you on right now?" Stamens, who just came out of a coma, written by writers who apparently are still in a coma, judging by the quality of the writing, replies, "I'm just moving a little slowly right now." Jet Reno then says, "If you can breathe, you can work," in her maddeningly boring and yet unrelentingly nasty little voice. Then she gestures towards the poor guy shoveling the dead body parts, gestures toward her fellow crewman, and says, "So, unless Hazmat over here is going to be helping after cleaning up on aisle 5, at which point, the poor crewman with the shovel raises his hand and says rather meekly, my name's Gene, actually. At which point, the scintillating Jet Reno brushes him off, annoyed at him asserting the right to at least be afforded the dignity of being called by his name, and replies with as much snark as a disgusting no-talent nothing with zero acting ability can muster, quote, yeah, I've already forgotten that. And there it is. No longer content to insult Gene Roddenberry vicariously by attacking and destroying his life's work, they actually, in this scene, turn Gene into a janitor, scooping up their hideous, ugly mess with a stupid shovel. Proud Rod Roddenberry? Aren't you just so proud to be working with these scumbags? That's how much these people hate Star Trek and hate its fans. Let's really wrap our heads around this for a minute, okay? The so-called writers, the supposed shepherds of the Star Trek universe now, the ones allegedly working for Viacom CBS, looking after its crown jewel, reveal a massive amount about themselves in this one short scene. Ugliness and stupidity. Those words define the Star Trek universe now. Here we've got a crewman forced to clean up hazmat waste with a shovel in the high-tech future. Whereas, in our primitive times, a guy having to clean up such waste would actually have a hazmat suit on to, protect him against the hazardous material he's cleaning up. Gee, STD writers, isn't English a marvelous thing? Hazmat, see, stands for hazardous materials. Who knew, you insufferably contemptible clods? And in this shot, this guy doesn't have a hazmat suit on at all. Just some galoshes and a shovel. For ugliness, we get the gore of body parts lying all over the floor, being clumsily scooped into a hazmat bin, only see, the body parts are caked now on the outside of the hazmat bin, defeating the whole purpose of a hazmat bin, namely to dispose of hazardous waste, not smear it around. But the clods writing this garbage can't be bothered to think about the garbage they're writing, probably because their scripts in and of themselves are hazardous materials. It's stupid, because they'd have much better ways to clean up in the future than a shovel, and it's ugly not merely because they're insulting Gene Roddenberry by implying that he's just their janitor by naming the guy Gene, but also fundamentally, at its core, this scene is ugly because of the appalling lack of dignity and respect exhibited toward a fellow crewman. Above all else, Gene Roddenberry's Star Trek represented respect. Respect for the intelligence of viewers, respect for the craft of writing, respect for science, respect for humanity, respect for all races and sexes, and most of all, respect for individuals. There is no respect whatsoever in Star Trek Discovery, and this scene amply illustrates what's wrong with this hideous shambling mockery of a show. It is unspeakably ugly and nasty that a senior officer, for no good reason whatsoever, would degrade and humiliate a fellow crewman who is just doing their job. The lack of compassion, the lack of respect, the lack of humanity, the lack of common courtesy here is a prime example of why I have nothing but loathing and contempt for this hideous show. It seems clear to me that these people have no respect and no shame. It seems to me that this is debatably the ugliest scene in the history of Star Trek. It is the ugliest precisely because it is so petty. It is so pointless. It is just so small-minded and mean-spirited as to defy any legitimate need in the plot to show this kind of ugliness. There really is no point to this scene. It is just there to be ugly, to exemplify everything that Star Trek Discovery stands for. Now, these writers did not have him say his name was Roddenberry, and so they preserve a small shred of plausible deniability, and I'm certain if pressed they would deny it. But we know, don't we, by the way that this scene is set up, the pointlessness of it, the fact that it's Gene. At the very least, it points to a lack of due diligence, a lack of attention, and a lack of care in the show. And at the very worst, well, Star Trek written by people who hate Star Trek, for people who hate Star Trek. At its heart, Star Trek Discovery is ugly and stupid in every instance. Whether it's the idiotic parasitic ice in this episode that gets thicker at night when it's colder, as ice is wont to do, even non-parasitic ice. But somehow, this fact that ice gets thicker at night is miraculous to the idiots that write this crap. And despite things like sonar in space or just the everyday pointless bitchy snark that passes for dialogue with so many of these placeholders in search of characters, Star Trek Discovery is a stake driven into the heart of the franchise. This scene, in microcosm, is exactly why Star Trek is dead, and why Kurtzman and the people that work behind the scenes on this show should never be allowed to touch anything valuable again. Note to self, Hollywood, watch Star Trek Discovery, watch what's happening to Star Trek, and figure it out. From the center of the earth, this is Dictor Van Doomcock bidding you all, my friends, stay angry.